students. I am Gloria Betcher. I'm going to be talking to you about post-secondary education, and I'm going to start sharing my screen. So we're going to see if that works. I teach at Iowa State, so I have a lot of experience with these online classes, and the one thing online has taught me is that you can't count on the technology. So let's see if we can get that PowerPoint working, and we will go from there.
Looks great.
Okay, so I want to hit some high points about what post-secondary education is and what you can do with that field. But I think that the first thing I probably should do is introduce myself, and obviously my screen is already going wild. So we will try and make sure that you can see this. So as I said, I'm Gloria Betcher and I teach English at Iowa State. I happen to have been there for 27 years. I have a BA cum laude from St. Olaf College. I have, and that's in Latin and Medieval Studies, but I have an MA and a PhD in English from the University of Minnesota. So one thing you could take away from this is that if you want to go into college or university teaching, you're going to need degrees in order to do that. But as you'll see, I'm going to try and expand that definition of post-secondary education a little bit so that we can maybe get some more people under the tent of post-secondary education. So one thing that I can tell you about myself is that I love learning from and sharing my knowledge with others. So as you can see here, I even did a lecture for my students from my backyard after the derecho hit us. So even that post-derecho storm damage can be a teachable moment for those of us who are in post-secondary education. It's important that students understand that we are human. So what does post-secondary education mean anyway? How do we define that field? Most of us probably know that post-secondary education is teaching after high school. So teaching at a college or a university, teaching at a community college, all of those are pretty common definitions, and I think maybe that's actually the definition that was provided for this virtual career fair. But I want to expand that definition because post-secondary simply means after high school. So you could be training others in vocational fields or in trades, or you could simply be helping others to gain a degree or advanced certification in a field. And you'll notice I didn't say what field. We're talking about specialized fields here. So you're going to be getting advanced training in some field. Does that mean that you have to have an MA and a PhD like me in order to teach welding or over-the-road truck driving? Most of the over-the-road truck drivers I know don't have MAs or PhDs. Some of them don't even have their college degrees, but they have their certificate from an AA program. And they were taught by other people in their field. So if you're an educator like me, you love to continue learning and you love to share your knowledge. And you'll notice that, well, if we define post-secondary education as university or college teaching, you need an advanced degree, MA, Master of Fine Arts, PhD, Juris Doctor for those people who might want to teach in law school, or you need an advanced certification, or you need to have years of work to qualify you as a master in a field. And so those people who are teaching as masters in a field, they may be master plumbers, master electricians. They may have advanced certification in nursing. they maybe aren't the kind of egghead you picture a professor being, having gone to school for years and years and years. They may have acquired their knowledge through a training program and on the job. But the one thing you can know about those educators in post-secondary education is that they are good at what they do. They know their field, and they are able to share their knowledge with others. And that knowledge, as you can see, is broad. We can't just limit this to people like me who are interested in medieval literature. That's a pretty niche market, and there aren't that many of us around who work in that. But when we start thinking about all those people who are teaching at DMAC, or who are teaching at Kirkwood, or any of the other community colleges, or at the trade schools that may not be associated with community colleges, we suddenly have a very broad pool of people who are able to share what they know with somebody else and get paid for doing it. And that means that the teaching fields in post-secondary education are many and varied. I just grabbed a few of them here for this slide, but you can see that everything from English to welding, nursing to culinary food science, career training broadly, chemical engineering, all of those are fields that you could learn here in Iowa and then share with others. But what you have to be able to do is commit to a field and then get advanced education, whether that is in the classroom or on the job in that field, so that you're qualified to teach others. I said that you have to love what you're doing. You have to love learning. You have to love sharing what you do. I love those things. What I don't love about my job is having to grade people. I want my students to learn things. I want them to understand about my field, but I hate having to grade papers. And I think if you asked almost any educator, at least in the humanities, like English, what I teach, you're going to be told, we really love our field, we love our students, we hate having to grade people. And so maybe that's the difference between going into an advanced academic field versus going into teaching a trade. Because there are an awful lot of people that I know who are tradespeople or who are in programs like nursing who really love what they do because it's a vocation. That's why they call it vocational education. You have been called to that job. And you don't have to grade other people except when they're trying to earn their certificates. So teaching is sharing. Teaching requires learning. You have to be in it for the long term. Most of these advanced degrees will take multiple years. A typical master's program at Iowa State, for example, takes about 2 years, 30 credits of advanced education in a field. And if you wanted to go on for a PhD, it could take even longer than that. For certification, you have to be able to go through the stages of development to become a master in your field. Now, if you're a tradesperson, you might actually go through a series of being an apprentice, a journeyman, and then a master, and then be teaching others in that secondary program. But all of these programs require years of investment and love for what you're doing in order to share with others. And the two things that I think you need to know are you gotta love what you do and be willing to teach and able to teach, and you don't go into it for the money. There is very little money to be had in most of these post-secondary education opportunities. Some fields are more lucrative than others, but you might make more money actually being a plumber than teaching others how to be plumbers. You might make more money being a consultant who teaches communication than being a professor like me who teaches communication. So before you go into post-secondary education, you have to decide that you're willing and able to commit and that you love what you're doing, because that's going to be the biggest reason for doing it and the thing that keeps you coming back for years. That's pretty much what I've got to say about this. Now, I don't know if any of you have any questions. I could go on about some other aspects of post-secondary education, but I want to give you a chance to ask questions if you have any.
Gloria, one question is, I know that Iowa State being a science and technology institute, a land-grant institute, there's a lot of research that happens up there. So if you're going into post-secondary education at a university level or a community college level even, can you expect to have research be a part of your day-to-day job?
It depends on the job you have. So I didn't want to get into the weeds too much on the various jobs, but if you are a professor who has a tenure line position, which means that you are basically hired until you retire, and you have earned that position by doing teaching and research and service to your institution, then research is a key component. And especially in the sciences, that research is often going to be laboratory research that is contributing to the larger body of knowledge nationwide or worldwide. So it's not just a small test in your lab like we might be used to from high school. It's a long-term research program that may in fact be funded by federal money. And Iowa State, of course, is world-renowned for its research programs in the sciences and in agriculture. And there's also a lot of research in engineering fields that's conducted at Iowa State. Iowa State used to be categorized under our old categorization system as a Research 1 institution, which meant research was at the forefront. So tenure line professors, people who get tenured in a position for life, basically until they retire, are doing that research. Now, there are some people who graduate with a PhD who decide they want to do some postgraduate work before becoming professors, and they also may be joining research teams as postdoctoral researchers. The other category of professor is people like me. I happen to be what we call a non-tenure eligible faculty member. I'm a teaching professor. So I've been hired and have for 27 years taught students. I don't have a research requirement for my job, but I do research. And perhaps not surprisingly, as a literature specialist, I don't work in the lab. I learned in high school that laboratory sciences and mathematics and my brain did not mesh well. So don't ask me about those failed science experiments where I broke thermometers in my toffee that we were making. You know, I was a disaster. So my research on medieval Cornish drama, which is a very small niche, requires that I be able to read multiple languages, that I be able to read the handwriting, the paleography of multiple periods for about 1,000 to 1,500 years worth of documents, during which time languages shifted, handwriting shifted. So those are the kinds of things I specialize in and the research that I conduct. It is also contributing to the worldwide body of knowledge, but people might think, well, that doesn't seem all that useful. It depends how you define useful. And if useful is contributing to a body of knowledge and understanding the world cultures and where they came from, that's somewhat different than contributing to a new vaccine for coronavirus. And so every field has its own standards for what constitutes research. If you're teaching at a community college, you are teaching people practical skills that may prepare them for moving on to a program at a university or a college. You may be, again, teaching in the trades, so you are not responsible for the same kind of research. Your primary job is teaching and helping those students to either transition to other educational institutions or to transition into the workforce where they too then could develop the skill set that's necessary to become a master at whatever they're doing.
Great.
Other questions?
Another one might be because not in the vocational field, but in the advanced educations and what you do you think that it's more common for a student to stay in school and continue to accumulate their degrees and work toward their degrees and then immediately start teaching? Or would you say that it's equally common for people to get maybe their bachelor's, work for a while, come back and work toward a master's or a PhD level degree, and then start teaching later in their career?
I think both things are possible. And for anyone who's interested in going into post-secondary education, I think it's wise to research the job market as you are getting ready to finish your bachelor's degree or your certification, where you're considering what are my next options. If the job market for professors in college or university in your field does not look good, if there are very few people being hired in your field, then maybe entering the field at the time that you would be finishing your degree program would not be the best timing. And so there are people who look at that and say the job market is lousy. I am not going to continue with my education right now. I'm going to go out into the real world. We talk about that a lot. The real world, getting a job, building some other experience, and finding out what I like to do, along with the possibility of going on for the degrees you need for post-secondary teaching. But likewise, there are people like me who went straight through from kindergarten through PhD, never took a break, and then later maybe realized that the job market wasn't as good as they thought it would be in their field. And so there are advantages to that because you keep your momentum, you keep your thread of research interests, you are able to build your network of scholars from the time you are in college all the way through your degree program, finishing your PhD or your MA or your MFA. And that momentum, that inertia can build your enthusiasm for going on to teach. Whereas taking a break can sometimes derail those plans. I know a lot of people will take a break after college because they want to get married. And so if you happen to think, I'm going to come back later for my MA or PhD after my partner and I have a couple of kids, you may wait years before re-entering that post-secondary job market because post-secondary education requires a big time commitment, doing the coursework, doing the research that leads to a master's thesis or a PhD dissertation. It's very difficult to mesh those effectively with having a family. although I've seen some excellent PhD and MA students come through our program at Iowa State, and I certainly know many people who have successfully done that, it is something to think about. Education, advanced degrees are much easier when you're younger. When you're older, you have perhaps more drive and more insight into what's important in life, and that perspective can really help you to home in on those things that are going to be the most important to you as you go through your degree program and into teaching. So there are benefits on both sides. Obviously, if you're going into a trade, I wouldn't recommend taking a lot of time off unless you're not sure that that vocation is for you. If it's really not calling to you and you're going into it because mom or dad said, you really ought to be an electrician, they make a lot of money, that's not the best reason to go into that field and then move on to teach others. You have to be committed to the field first.
Excellent. Excellent insight. Thank you so much. I don't see any other questions coming through. And so with that, is there any last minute thoughts or insights you'd like to share, Gloria?
Well, Allie, I think maybe the most important message, and this comes from my years of advising undergraduates at Iowa State, is that whatever career path you choose, but especially if you're thinking you want to go on to teach others or train others, you have to have the love and commitment going in, and you shouldn't convince yourself that you have that love or commitment if it's not natural to you. So listening to others telling you what you should be doing is definitely not the driver for going into post-secondary education. You have to love your job because you will be investing years of your life and your money in getting the education that's necessary to do that teaching or training job for students after high school. And there's nothing worse than having a professor or a trainer who has come to hate what they're doing. If that love for the profession is not there, it's not going to be a positive learning experience for all of those many thousands of students that you will impact over the span of your career.
That's powerful.
That's all I've got.
Yeah, very, very powerful. And so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for taking the time to educate us on what post-secondary education really is at different levels, whether it's a university, a community college, or a trade. I think that it was very informative. It was a lot of information, and you condensed it in a short amount of time. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and I wish those who are attending well in trying to decide what they're going to do with their lives.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.